Hello, the internet. My name is Ed, and if you haven't seen the first part of this series, I'm making a new homemade trading card game from scratch. It's called Saturday Morning Smash, where each player races to take down their opponent's giant monster. We ended last episode with a couple of objectives. Firstly, nail down some factions that players can choose from, and secondly, throw some cards together and try out the gameplay loop. So let's talk factions. The two that we have are the monster-focused faction, which I think I'm going to call Titans. Their playstyle is very aggro. It's focused on using their monster to batter the opponent. Lots of action cards, you get in there, you smash the city to pieces, that kind of thing. And then the other side of the spectrum is the faction that I'm calling Military, whose playstyle is filling the battlefield with smaller units that work together to kind of overwhelm the opponent's monster with a huge horde. The other one that I'm sure about is the general cards. They're all faction agnostic, fairly generalist, so they can slot into any deck. But if there's 5 factions in the spectrum, what are the other 3? Sticking with the theming of a dumb, cheesy Saturday morning cartoon, smack bang between the Titans and the Military, I've put Aliens. Now I can see them as a good mid-range playstyle, with kind of a 50-50 mix of units and action cards. In terms of story, they've travelled from across the galaxy to invade Earth because of our rich deposits of that MacGuffin magical crystal that generates the energy, which, as a working name, I think I'm going to call acetite. Like acetate, the clear plastic sheets that cartoons used to be drawn on, but made to sound a little bit more like crystally. The aliens monster is something out of this world. Space goo, tentacles, lots of eyes. Maybe even mixing biological features with mechanical upgrades if I'm feeling bold enough. So Titans on one side, Military on the other, and Aliens in the middle leaves us with 2 spare slots. One a bit more unit-based, one a bit more action-focused, and for that one, I think I've penciled in Wizards. I think this is the Control faction. They lean more towards action cards, and the units that they do have tend to be more about their abilities than their fighting prowess. And I think that story-wise, these are the humans that have known about acetite for centuries, studying its magical properties in secret, and now everyone's fighting over it, so they need to get involved. Their giant monster is some sort of fantastical creature, like a dragon or a phoenix that they've summoned maybe, or, I don't know, a giant magical construct. I'm not sure yet. But the last faction is really stumping me. They're unit card leaning, and I imagine they're probably bigger bodies than the hordes of the Military. And the only idea that I've had for this so far is demons. Because they could create some pretty awesome giant monsters. But I'm not 100% convinced that they'd fit into the light and cartoony style that I'm shooting for. The current idea for the story of this faction is that they're the enemies that the Wizards have been fighting with in secret for centuries, before the aliens arrived and the Military discovered acetite, and all the Titans awoke. Again, demons could fit that niche, but if you have any ideas for a faction theme that could slot in here, please hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that's where we're at with factions. But what about testing the gameplay? Well, I made a couple of decks. I've thrown these against each other a bunch of times now, and I've noticed a few things. Firstly, the goddamn Military win every time, but that's just a balancing thing. I've got a few ideas about fixing that. Secondly, the deck building mechanics work. Are they better than a regular deck of cards in a traditional TCG? I don't know, but it definitely feels different, and I really like it. I've made a couple of changes to how I first envisioned it, which have streamlined the translation issues from a normal deck builder, and this is how it currently runs. So players take actions alternately throughout the round. These are things like playing a card, attack with a unit, whatever, but one of the actions that you can do is called Adapt. Now I imagine most of the time this will be the last action that you take in a round, because when you do, you discard all of your remaining cards, and you draw an equal number from the top of your adaptation deck. This is like your private market. You choose one of them to keep, and the rest go to the bottom of the adaptation deck. Now, in a normal deck builder, purchase cards go into your graveyard and then cycle into your deck later. But I found that in this, it meant that the first couple of rounds of the game went very slowly and very samey. So instead, purchase cards that you gain from adaptation are placed on top of your play deck. That way, you know that the card that you gain from adaptation will be in your next hand, and it lets you plan ahead a little bit, and it means that from the second round, things start branching. The other thing that I've done is, although the cards have the same value in terms of acquiring them, each one has a level. You can only play a card once you hit the corresponding rage level. So, if 2 of your body parts have been knocked out, you're at rage level 2, and you can play your helicopter. That way, there's a reason to take less powerful cards, so that you can actually do stuff in the early game, but it also doubles as a comeback mechanic, because if more of your monsters have been taken out, you're going to be at a higher rage level, you can play more powerful cards. This meant that I had to stop players from just stacking up damage across their opponent's body parts. Like, if they got each feature to the brink of death and then took them all out in one fell swoop, then they'd win without their opponent raising their rage level steadily enough to play those high level cards, and that just leads to bad feels. So instead, I think part of the end of each round is that damage just clears off the board. That way, you have to finish off a target within a round. And that change made the attacks feel more focused and the back and forth feel more weighty. There's no more grinding your opponent down. You make your plan for the round and you gotta commit. Well, that is until you get punched in the mouth yourself. But what if you adapt and all of your options are way too high a level? Does that mean that you've got a dead card floating about in your deck because you're not at rage level 3 yet? No, because every card can instead be played for energy. Energy is like another resource that you use to power your abilities. And each card, instead of being played for its written effect, can be discarded to generate the energy printed on it to power other cards that you can play because you are at that rage level. So now I know how the game plays. I can readdress the cards that I threw together and try and make the selection a bit more interesting. Also, these adaptation decks are just 20 cards, 2 copies of 10 different cards, so I gotta come up with way more ideas because I think a real adaptation deck is going to be like 40 cards. At the moment, the effects of the monsters that I'm playing with are identical on either side, and I might keep it that way for a while just to keep playtesting, but eventually I'm going to start mixing and matching those options too. It's crazy how much this game has already developed even after the first few days. I'm hyped to see where it's at the next update. And if you've liked these videos, I'd love it if you subscribe so that you can follow along on this journey too. And again, any ideas that people have for that final faction would be awesome to see in the comments. Do demons fit? Or is there a better option that I'm completely missing? Hit me up. Again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.